On Easter Sunday, a lawsuit was filed in state court in Nevada against Hall of Fame tight end Shannon Sharpe because he has become such a massive media star, especially in the past few years. The lawsuit is going to attract.
Gil, I mean, I remember walking out and CJ, the producer of the show, he's like, Shannon, this is going to blow up the internet.
When the lawsuit against Shannon Sharpe detonated across the headlines, it was less like a spark and more like somebody poured gasoline all over his empire and flicked a lit match. 1 second, he was riding the high of Club Shay, pulling in tens of millions of views, cashing checks bigger than any season he ever played in the NFL. And the next, he was scrambling to hold the walls up as they shook with accusations, nasty enough to stain everything he had built.
But it just took off.
Yeah.
And everybody was just... They were just shaking their head. I was like, what? They're like, Shannon, this is going to go crazy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just any lawsuit. This wasn't your garden variety he said, she said. It was a full-throttle, scorched earth attack that dropped a sledgehammer on Sharpe's public image. Filed by a woman known only as Jane Doe and backed by the increasingly infamous Texas attorney Tony Buzbee, the complaint was a blueprint for total reputational annihilation. Jane Doe wasn't just accusing him of misconduct. She painted a portrait of a man who allegedly manipulated, controlled, and terrorized a woman half his age, whose influence and fame gave him, according to her lawsuit, a sense of entitlement so sick it curdled into brutality. The allegations read like something torn from a criminal underworld script. Jane Doe said Shannon first locked eyes with her in an LA gym when she was only 19. 19, fresh out of high school, still figuring out where the hell she fit into the world. And here comes a 56-year-old icon, muscled up, silver-tongued, and dripping with that kind of dangerous, predatory confidence that can make you think it's all a dream until it snaps into a nightmare. According to her, the relationship started consensual. Rocky, sure, but consensual. But the turbulence didn't stay verbal for long.
And that the was about handcuffs, choking, putting on dog collars. Do you get those at Petco?
The details she laid out were graphic, disturbing, and full of the kind of chilling specificity that sticks with you, whether you want it to or not. She described being treated like an object, choked until her body betrayed her into freezing, threatened with harm while a firearm sat within arm's reach, all while desperately trying to signal to friends from her phone in case she disappeared into another one of those statistics no one likes to talk about until it's too late. She said he videotaped their encounters, shared them, broke every bond of trust a human being can have with another, and then laughed about it afterward. And it gets worse. Much worse. Jane Doe described not one but multiple instances where she said Shannon forced himself on her despite her pleading for him to stop, including a brutal encounter in October 2024 that left her emotionally wrecked and physically terrified. She laid it all out, the sobbing, the begging, the feeling of being pinned and powerless, and then again, another brutal scene just 3 months later to start the new year with the same horror all over again. In her lawsuit, Jane Doe didn't just demand monetary damages. She demanded blood, figuratively at least, 50 million United States dollars, a number big enough to destroy an average man's future and symbolic enough to hit Shannon where it hurt the most, in his status, his legacy, his ability to command respect every time he walked into a room.
His attorney offered that up publicly. To me, her turning it down shows that it's not a money grab. No, it shows that it's a bigger shakedown.
Tony Buzbee was the perfect villain for this saga. To his enemies, he's the guy who weaponizes the courtroom, a media shark circling for the scent of rich, vulnerable targets. To his supporters, he's the slayer of untouchables, the guy who drags gods down to the dirt. He's already gunned after Diddy, after Jay-Z, after Watson, and now Shannon Sharpe. And if there's one thing Buzbee knows how to do, it's orchestrate a media circus that makes it impossible for anyone to pretend they didn't hear the allegations whispered on every street corner. But Shannon didn't fold the way a lot of men in his position might have. Oh no, he went scorched earth right back. He called it a shakedown. He recorded an emotional video message that sounded less like a press conference and more like a man digging his heels into the dirt for a fight to the demise. He said it was all a setup, coordinated by Buzbee, and he wasn't going to let himself be turned into another black man hung out to dry in the court of public opinion. He even named the woman, revealing that Jane Doe was Gabriela Zuniga, a young woman with an OnlyFans following and a heavy social media presence. That was a strategic nuclear move. Strip away the mask of anonymity, push back against the narrative of helplessness, and paint her instead as a savvy operator who had as much control in the relationship as he did.
And I don't want to get too far into it, but anyway, it was the person told a lie.
His lawyer, Lanny Davis, who is basically the legal equivalent of bringing a bazooka to a knife fight, didn't waste any time either. In carefully scripted statements, Davis insisted the relationship between Sharpe and Zuniga was consensual, full of role-playing, fantasy talk, and mutual kinks that had now been weaponized against Shannon in the dirtiest way imaginable. According to Davis, that audio recording of Shannon threatening to choke her, snipped, edited, sliced, like deli meat to make a consensual, playful conversation sound sinister. But even as Shannon and his team tried to steady the ship, one fact loomed like a guillotine blade overhead. Shannon had offered Zuniga 10 million United States dollars to make all this go away. 10 million. That's not a pocket change hush money offer. That's an I'll pay whatever it takes to keep the tape out of the press move. You don't throw around that kind of coin unless you're either desperate or know something getting out could blow up your entire existence.
Shannon Sharpe says he's temporarily stepping away from ESPN in the wake of a $50 million lawsuit accusing him of rape. A woman filed suit against Sharpe on Sunday, accusing him of raping her twice.
And once that tidbit surfaced, the narrative shifted from poor Shannon, targeted for his success, to wait, if you're innocent, why are you paying hush money at all? The court of public opinion doesn't wait for discovery and cross-examination. It watches headlines like hawks and builds verdicts from rumors and rage. Meanwhile, Tony Busby practically danced on Instagram, posting his own statements that dripped with contempt. He hammered home the contradiction with all the subtlety of a battering ram. How can Shannon call the case meritless on one hand, but on the other hand offer 8 figures to bury it? Either you believe you're innocent and fight to your last breath, or you pay and admit you're scared of the truth leaking. You can't have it both ways. As the public clutched their pearls and whispered in group chats, the media began digging, and boy, they found skeletons. And some of them weren't even buried that deep. Word surfaced that back during Shannon's time at FS1, there had been an incident involving a female production assistant. Allegedly, Shannon had gotten physical with her. Playful roughhousing, his camp called it. A totally innocent misunderstanding, they said. Yet somehow, mysteriously, Fox Sports decided it was better to cut a fat settlement check for several $100,000 rather than let it go to court. No lawsuit, no criminal charges, just a quiet payout and a nod between gentlemen that some things are better swept under the rug. Funny how that works. Funny how the very same pattern, denial, minimization, private settlement, seem to be popping up again now in a much nastier, much messier arena.
Are now beginning to bring up past things that have happened with Shannon Sharpe, including a temporary restraining order that was filed against him back in 2010 from a woman that he was dealing with at the time, who accused him of sexual assault. He said in different things. Now, this was dropped. It was dismissed, that restraining order.
And as if the situation needed even more gasoline poured onto it, news broke that this wasn't even the first time Shannon had faced accusations like these. Back in 2010, a woman named McKelly Evans had accused him of horrifying behavior during the messy end of their near-decade relationship. There was a restraining order. There were whispers of legal threats, of reputations promised to be ruined. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Another woman, another accusation of violent control, another round of media scandal that, at the time, Shannon barely outran with his career intact. And through it all, Sharpe's supporters clung to his defense like a raft in a rising flood. Stephen A. Smith went public with his belief in Shannon's innocence, emphasizing it was personal, not factual. That's where things stood now. Faith versus facts, loyalty versus logic. Meanwhile, in the background, there was the unmistakable sound of knives being sharpened. Because while Shannon and his team worked overtime to frame this as just another black man getting lynched by the media machine, there were bigger whispers rising behind closed doors. Whispers that suggested this wasn't just about one woman and one lawsuit. Whispers that hinted this was a strategic strike, a punishment for Shannon getting too bold, too loud, too willing to put people like Katt Williams, Monique, and Katt Williams on his platform to air out Hollywood's dirtiest secrets.
It's for everything I'm telling you. That's why I can say them so freely.
I need another. You here? Get your number.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Come on.
And those whispers weren't just coming from conspiracy theorists. They were coming from Dave himself. The same Dave who walked away from 50 million United States dollars and Hollywood's golden handcuffs. The same Dave who had survived his own battles with the industry's shadow puppeteers. He had warned Shannon after that Club Shay interview with Katt Williams' smashed YouTube records. Warned him that when you start dragging the curtain back, when you start letting people speak the unspeakable, The people who really run things will remind you whose house you're living in. And as Shannon watched his $100 million media deal swirl down the drain in real time, it was becoming terrifyingly clear. Whether this lawsuit was real, exaggerated, or fabricated out of thin air, it had already served its purpose. It had clipped his wings, sent a message, and thrown a once untouchable giant into a public relations bloodbath with no clean way out.
And I don't know where Cat is, but that is waiting for all of us.
But the real earthquake wasn't just the lawsuit or even the whispers of an orchestrated takedown. It was the growing rift that this scandal exposed inside the black entertainment world itself. A divide that was about to be ripped wide open when Dave, Katt Williams, and Shannon Sharpe found themselves locked in a high-stakes battle over truth, loyalty, and the very soul of the industry they all claimed to love. And once you start tugging on that thread, the whole rotten tapestry begins to unravel at once. Because the storm brewing behind Shannon Sharpe wasn't just about one woman or one settlement offer. It was the sound of an industry's dirty laundry getting yanked into broad daylight. Dave wasn't throwing out casual warnings for drama. He was speaking from the trenches. He knew the way power moves when it's threatened. And now it wasn't just Shannon under fire. It was the entire fragile alliance of truth-tellers who had started pulling Hollywood's mask clean off.
I love everybody, but I love Katt Williams more than a lot of people. And that is wild.
In the middle of this corporate, career-smashing freefall, Dave made it clear he wasn't buying the bad timing narrative the publicists were peddling. No, Dave said it flat out. This wasn't bad luck. It was bad faith. A warning shot disguised as a lawsuit. The kind of playbook move you only see when someone's handlers decide he needs to be reminded that his fame doesn't belong to him. That it never did. Shannon thought Club Shay was just a podcast. Hollywood thought it was a problem, and problems get handled. But here's where things started getting messy, even inside the so-called resistance, because while Dave was pointing fingers at the machine, he wasn't shy about turning his fire on Katt Williams, too. He didn't like the way Katt had sat across from Shannon, spilled every juicy, career-crippling secret he had bottled up for years, and then turned the blades sideways into his own people. Not the gatekeepers, not the billionaires, not the executives hiding behind their marble walls. Nope. Katt pointed the barrel straight at his fellow black comics, dragging names like Cedric the Entertainer, Steve Harvey, and Kevin Hart into the mud without mercy.
All right, I'm at war with the Illuminati too, but what part of the war is ethering Cedric the Entertainer?
Dave, watching from the sidelines, called it what it was, a betrayal wrapped in a truth-teller's robe. Because for all the talk about exposing the system, Katt's real targets weren't the people who held the real keys to the kingdom. They were the ones just trying to survive inside it. And Dave, who had fought tooth and nail to avoid becoming another puppet on the industry's stage, saw right through it. He didn't flinch. He didn't sugarcoat it. He called Katt out publicly, accusing him of ethering his own people for clout, for applause, for the same cheap internet gasps he claimed to despise. And the most savage part, Dave pointed out the one thing nobody wanted to admit. Katt didn't fire a single shot at any white comedian, not one. He dragged his black peers across the coals but left the real architects of the game untouched. It wasn't just messy, it was treasonous. If you're going to be the revolutionary, Dave said, you better be willing to swing at the ones who actually built the system, not just the ones trying to survive it. But Katt wasn't about to apologize. He doubled down. He said he came prepared to burn bridges and had even cut entire sections out of his Club Shay interview because they would have ended careers if he had let them fly. It wasn't remorse talking, it was calculation. Katt knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted the attention, he wanted the crown, and if he had to stomp over a few heads to get there, so be it.
He only eats the He didn't say anything about any of these white boys.
Meanwhile, back in Shannon's camp, the walls were closing in faster than anyone expected. Because while the scandal was exploding publicly, behind the scenes, Shannon's media empire was bleeding out. The rumors about the $100 million United States dollar media deal collapsing weren't rumors anymore. They were reality. Brands were pulling back, corporate partners were ghosting. Every whisper about his personal life turned into a conference call at some executive boardroom where men in suits decided he was too messy, too risky, too damaged to touch now. And the real kicker? Even inside his circle, people started to hedge, quietly. Sharpe loyalists, the same ones who'd ridden the Club Shay wave to views and headlines, started getting a little quieter, a little more strategic with their public comments. Because no matter how tight your inner circle looks on Instagram, nobody wants to be standing next to the guy holding a live grenade when it finally goes off.
Alrighty, y'all. So the Shannon Sharpe ESPN, does he still keep his job conversation is beginning to, I was going to say beginning to happen, but it's been happening, but I think now it's beginning to get louder because of different things that Attorney Busby has released, including the audios. So right now the conversation is, why is Shannon Sharpe still able to be?
The industry smelled blood, and not just Shannon's. This wasn't about one man anymore. It was about reminding everyone what happens when you stop playing the game, when you stop nodding along, when you start letting the wrong people speak too freely on your platform. It was about showing every upstart podcaster, every rogue comedian, every black media figure who thought they could outgrow the system, that the system could still crush you like an ant under its boot. And while Shannon screamed into the void about shakedowns and blackmail, the machine kept grinding forward. Every new headline, every new lawsuit, every new accusation, whether true or manufactured, was another nail being pounded into the coffin of Shannon Sharpe's untouchable reputation. Even worse, Shay Evans, the woman from the 2010 incident, wasn't going away quietly. She popped up like a ghost at a funeral, filing a new defamation suit that dragged every ugly chapter back into the spotlight. She accused Shannon of trying to silence her back then, the same way he was allegedly trying to silence his current accuser, now with threats, intimidation, and a good old-fashioned character assassination campaign. And though Shannon's lawyers dismissed her as a disgruntled ex with an agenda, the damage was done. Another voice in the choir of chaos. Another reminder that once these stories start stacking, it doesn't really matter anymore what's true and what's not. Perception becomes reality.
We didn't want everything to happen immediately.
Absolutely.
Like,
It's
only
only
Thursday.
instant. They want everything to instantly happen. It doesn't work like that.
The righteous people on Reddit, baby, they are dissecting and divulging right now.
Through all of this, ESPN did what big corporations always do. They cut the cord the second things got uncomfortable. Shannon announced he was stepping away to focus on family, but anyone with a functioning brainstem knew what that really meant. Disney didn't want this heat. First Take didn't want this heat. Nobody trying to sell sneakers and insurance commercials wanted to be in business with a man buried under this much smoke, even if none of it was proven yet. Meanwhile, Club Shay, once a juggernaut, was turning into a ghost ship. The Katt Williams interview, once the crown jewel of Shannon's media empire, started looking like the exact moment the plane lost cabin pressure at 30,000 feet. People weren't just replaying the jokes and the spicy takes anymore. They were replaying it like forensic experts, looking for the moment everything went wrong.
But a lot of the stuff he was saying, because I don't live in that world, people think because, oh, Shannon, you live in Hollywood, you have that, you must have heard, you must have been, no, bro.
And it wasn't just Shannon who was bleeding. Katt's scorched earth approach was starting to backfire too. Sure, the internet loved a good spectacle, but Hollywood? Hollywood had a long memory and a long list of people willing to take your spot the second you stumbled. Katt had made himself radioactive. Deals were drying up. Bookings were getting canceled. People who once whispered about loving his honesty started loudly reminding each other that he was too unpredictable, too controversial, too risky. The funny thing about burning bridges is you don't always get to choose which side of the river you're left standing on. And Katt, for all his bravado, was finding out that being the last man standing doesn't mean you're still in the game. And then there was Dave, watching all of it unfold like a man who had seen this movie before and already knew the ending. He didn't gloat, he didn't run to the cameras, he just shook his head and kept moving. Because if there's one rule in Hollywood that's older than the hills, it's this: the machine doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, and it never lets you walk away clean once you start making too much noise. The question now wasn't whether Shannon Sharpe would survive this scandal. That ship had already sailed. The real question was, what was coming next? Because if history tells us anything, it's that when the machine decides to come for you, it doesn't just take your career. It comes for your legacy, your reputation, your very name. And judging by the silence from the people who used to line up to get on Club Shay, Shannon was about to find out just how cold it gets when the lights go off and the cameras stop rolling.
Something you wish you were better at. Dealing with liars.
What do you think? Was this whole thing a hit job to silence a black man who got too powerful, or did Shannon Sharpe just outplay himself into a corner nobody could save him from? And is Katt Williams a hero for telling the truth, or just another pawn playing the wrong game with the wrong enemies? Let us know what you think down below, and we'll see you in the next one.